Hello and welcome to another album analysis. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the album Viva Las Vengeance. It is the 7th studio release from the Brendan Urie led project Panic at the Disco. It will be their 7th album overall, but their 3rd with him running it as a solo project. This album definitely takes a big step away from Pray for the Wicked and Death of a Bachelor, the two previous releases from him. This album takes on a much more 70s rock and roll inspired theme. We're also going to be seeing very heavy elements of theatrics, something that he seems to really love doing. He did on the previous album, possibly influenced by his performance in Kinky Boots and his kind of gravitation towards theatre and performing in stage shows. So will this album prove to be bigger than Elvis or just be an impersonator? Let's take a look at it track by track. The opening track to this album is the title track Viva Las Vengeance. Now this has got a great hook on it. It really is very catchy. It's easy to see why this was the first single that was released from the album. It has a very mainstream kind of sound, and it also acts as an intro to what this album wants to be about. It's about growing up in Vegas like Brendan Urie did. It's kind of encapsulating everything he knew about growing up, hence probably the 70s rock and roll influence on this album, because that's maybe what he grew up listening to as a kid. Because of this, it really does help set the tone, but straight away we do see these theatrics, and if you've seen the music video for that will also help kind of give you this idea. It's almost as if this entire album is meant to be a stage show. It's like he's writing his own musical, and they're going to see a lot of that cropping up throughout this album. Then for track 2 we do have Middle of a Breakup, a song that again just references to lots of 70s groups, the likes of T-Rex, Keep Your Disco, Give Me T-Rex. Now the one sad thing about this track is it is very shallow in its lyrical content. Brendan has been really good at writing songs that are full of depth and meaning, and this song just certainly has almost none of it. Don't get me wrong, it's catchy, it's got a great hook, and it's an easy song to sing along to, but unfortunately there's not much to the track besides that. It just does really feel like it falls flat. It doesn't seem like it's some of his best lyrical work, which really does unfortunately let it down. Then we've got the track Don't Let the Lights Go Out, which has a very kind of 70s slow rock feel to it, that kind of vibe. Also has backing vocals that are quite reminiscent of Motown, of almost swing, as if it could be on a stage, as if you've got singers in the background. He's worked with gospel choirs, he's worked with a lot of backing vocalists and groups over the years, and this is another song that really adds to that repertoire. And it's a style that works. He works really well with backing vocals, especially with that swing kind of sound, that Motown kind of sound is really actually quite nice for this particular track, and it's one of the things that really does work very, very well on this album. Then at track 4 we do have Local God. Now this song feels like a bit of a throwback to the band's early days, almost like he's reminiscing on those events that did happen, about being a local god, about that shooting to fame when they released their first few albums as a band and kind of discovering stardom. It also has some really nice guitar work, almost very surf rock kind of sound, very reminiscent of something like the Beach Boys. So we're seeing lots of these 60s, 70s rock influences already coming in, even though we're only 4 tracks into the album. Then at track 5 we do have StarSpangled Banger, a bit of a play on words from Banner. Maybe it's meant to be quite patriotic, but this song is very reminiscent of Steely Dan. It's got these really quick-witted, kind of very fast verses in it that really do kind of give it a really nice pace to it, and it is just interesting to see all these different influences coming in from all these different bands and how he's mimicking their style. But at the same time this doesn't always work because he's trying to cram so many styles into the same album. This song is also very patriotic in nature as well. The idea of some of the lyrics, we are the kids of the underground, we are the mainstream. This almost rise up, kind of getting everyone on their feet, getting everyone involved. And this goes back to the idea of it almost feeling like a stage show. Even some of the way the lyrics are kind of construed as well, with the harmonies and the backing vocals, almost kind of like a big fanfare on a stage. You can imagine it. You can imagine yourself sat there in the front row watching Brendan Urie on stage, belting out these songs at the top of his lungs, and that's what he's really trying to bring across in this, almost like this is just one big theatre show. Then for track 6 we have got God Killed Rock and Roll. Now this really kind of just feels like a budget version of Bohemian Rhapsody. I know he does a great cover. I've seen him do it live of Bohemian Rhapsody and he really does it justice for a cover version. But this is almost like he's tried to write his own version. We've got the same kind of style as that particular track. We've got these really nice slow piano intro, these really big builds, these kind of big fanfare moments, and these really low lows, almost very quiet, very reminiscent of Freddie Mercury, but it doesn't have that same pulling power, and I don't think you can really match up to that, and that's why it's like a budget Bohemian Rhapsody. And it's a shame because it's a great track, don't get me wrong, it's a brilliant effort, but it just tries too hard to be something that it can never be, which is a real shame because I think if he kind of put less emphasis on trying to sound like Queen, this would be a great track. But the fact that he's trying to emulate Freddie in this particular track just pushes it to that point where you're trying to, how do you kind of go up against one of the greatest songs of all time? You simply don't. You don't try it. You don't try and make a copy of it because it just is never going to sound as impressive. Then for track 7 we have got Say It Louder, a song all about fighting up against the odds, fighting up against adversity. But unfortunately this is another song that really just falls flat in terms of the lyrics. Just say it louder for the people in the back. It just feels like there's very little inspiration behind some of the lyrics in this, and it's a real shame because of what's been provided with us with on the past 2 albums. But I really don't want to take away from some of the great instrumental work we do see on this album. The guitar and drums really do help add to that pace that we've got, and it does shift quite a lot throughout this song. We go from very fast, energetic pace to a very slow, almost like he's leaning on a piano or just kind of stumbling across a stage, just talking to the audience or singing to the audience. So again, this album is very, very theatrical. It's the idea of kind of it conveying those emotions, conveying that style of interchanging between different scenes. Then for track 8 we do have Sugar Soaker. Now this feels very reminiscent of Van Halen, some of their very early work with some very interesting kind of quirky instrumental sections that we do see interspersed throughout this particular track. And he's putting so many styles and so many bands into this particular album that it just does feel a little bit overcrowded. It's the sort of album you'd expect to hear on a jukebox if you were in a bar or something. It feels like that kind of sound. So unfortunately Sugar Soaker is another track that does fall a bit flat and by the wayside. However, following on from that we have got track 9, which is Something About Maggie, and this feels like one of the best tracks on this album. This is like the real sweet spot that he's managed to hit, resorting back to that kind of swing kind of style that really works very well given his voice. He has a really nice operatic voice, has a really nice flow and a nice swing to it, and Brendan Urie is at his best when he plays on those strengths. I don't feel like most of this album has really kind of played to that strength of his. He's kind of tried to mash his operatic style with kind of old style rock and roll, and it just hasn't really worked out. But this song really does work. It has a very nice flow to it, has a very nice swing to it, and it is very easy to kind of sing along with some of the great instrumentation we've got behind it, and also the backing vocals as well, providing some really nice harmonies. Then for track 10 we do have Sad Clown, almost the ballad-esque song on this album, especially towards the outro. Before that we have some really nice operatic builds. Don't get me wrong, Brendan Urie has one of the most versatile voices going probably in the industry. There's certainly some notes that most other musicians cannot even come close to that he hits very, very easily. For some people they're not overly keen on his voice, but I do really enjoy the strengths of that and his ability to go to those operatic lengths to really provide some really strong vocals. And for this song we've got these really nice operatic builds that really complement him. We've got these big instrumental builds that really kind of help elevate him to another level, and it really does kind of add those levels of strength and really shows in full effect his vocals. I also like the use of a fiddle or a violin in the middle of the track. Almost has a very frantic sound to it. Again, adding these layers just to really help complement and pull everything together, which is really great to see. Then we've got the track All By Yourself, which almost has a very Steve Miller Band almost feel to it. It is it's got also a bit of a country vibe as well. Again, we're just covering everything in this particular album in terms of styles. We're looking at a real variety of different 60s, 70s groups and really just pulling them together and trying to take bits and pieces from every form of rock that we did have over that decade. At times as well it does have a very bluesy kind of sound. It's almost like you're just sauntering along. Again, similar to some of the other tracks we've had on this album, that very lazy kind of slow tempo, just leading you along, leading you through the track, which does actually flow quite well for a slower track. And sometimes it does suit his vocals as well, being able to just drag those notes out and just really extend them and push them through. Then we've got the final track, Do It To Death. And I quite liked this song actually. It was one that kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't overly keen the first time I heard it, but after a couple more listens I did enjoy it. Adding his unique vocals to old style rock. And it's weird because in previous songs it hasn't worked because he's tried to copy and emulate certain bands, certain styles. Whereas I think with this he kind of finally at the end of the album has kind of put his own spin on it and really pulled it together. But unfortunately it's a little bit too late. It does have a very nice soft outro just to really round out the album. Really let it just taper off and draw to a close. Overall, I do feel like this is probably the weakest of the solo albums that we have had so far. Just trying to draw too much influence from too many styles, try and copy and emulate so many 70s rock groups. And it's great that he's tried to do so, but the problem is that this song almost feels too theatrical. There's so much power in his voice, but there's certainly no lyrical content that's really kind of helping prop all this operatic and all this drama and theatre, kind of prop the stage up, which is a bit of a shame really. I think overall I'm going to have to give it probably a 5 out of 10. I want to like this album more, but I just can't look past the shallowness of the album and just the fact that the lyrics just feel so light and something's missing from them compared to the previous releases. I do like the fact that he's tried to challenge himself and he's taken on that style and tried to make it work, but I don't feel it's come full circle and really worked well enough. That being said though, there are some really good tracks on this album. Viva Las Vengeance has a great catchiness to it, a great hook. Same for Middle of a Breakup. Despite the missing lyrical content, it does have a very nice hook that people can sing along to very, very easily. And this definitely feels like the album that will be great for a live show. When you've got a live audience, getting that theatre, getting that atmosphere behind you, it will probably work very well. But as a standalone album that you're just listening to if you're out and about or you're sat at home listening to, it definitely just doesn't have that same theatrical pull that it would in front of a live audience. That is everything for today's video. As always, make sure to let me know your favourite song and let me know your thoughts on the album in the comment section below. I'd imagine this is going to be a bit of a controversial album, some are going to love it, some maybe not like it so much. I'm certainly on the fence. I'm kind of on the more negative side for this album, going off kind of previous releases and what he's tried to do on this. And if you want to see more content like this, then please do feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next album analysis.